Okay, so now what I want to go over is another component in the Safe Action trigger system. And this component probably is one of the, I don't know, the best part of the system, and why the Glock is probably safer than any other striker-fired pistol out there. And that would be basically the block here that keeps the seer or the cruciform back here from dropping. This has to drop down low to basically let go of the firing pin cleat here. For it to slip off of that cleat, it has to drop low enough to do that. And that's kind of what they design into the trigger housing here. So you'll see there's like a little step right there where I'm kind of pointing. Let's see if I have something I can point with here. So you'll see it's higher right here, and then there's a step right there. So when the trigger is in the forward position, you will see that it is on top of that step right here. It's sitting, the cruciform is up, resting, sitting on top of the that step in this trigger or the ejector housing here. So there's no way possibly to push down on the cruciform enough to get the cruciform or the seer portion to slip past the cleat on the firing pin. And if you can't get that to slip past that, the gun cannot fire. It just simply can't fire. Another thing that's very interesting about the Glock in this system here is that it is a double action pistol. I'll tell you that there are very few people that understand that the Glock is a double action pistol. You look next to an M&P or like a XD or some of the other guns out there, those are actually single action pistols. And the reason they're single action is because when you pull the trigger, the only thing that's happening when you're pulling the trigger is you're dropping down the seer and releasing the firing pin. That's it. In this gun, when you pull the trigger, you're actually pulling back the firing pin and charging it the rest of the way to get it to where the gun is fully charged and then fires. So it's a double action pistol. After you fired it, you go to the reset, and then you're at the wall and you fire it again, and it's more like a single action at the when you hit the reset. But from the start of the trigger pull, whenever the trigger moves at all, when you start pulling this trigger, the firing pin is actually moving rearward as you're pulling the trigger, making it a double action. So because of that double action feature, the seer on the Glock is part of this cruciform here, and the seer actually moves with the trigger bar. So this whole seer unit is moving backwards and forwards as the gun is firing. Whereas in most guns, it just moves down and up. It moves out of the way of a fully charged firing pin and moves back up and catches it. Moves out of the way and back up. This one actually pulls back the firing pin and releases it. But what's cool about that is it gives it the ability to move forward to where it's in a safe position when the trigger is forward. So when you see the trigger forward on a Glock, I mean, there's really no way for the gun to fire if the gun is all in proper working order and everything is, all the specs are proper. So yeah, you can see here there's a block, and the block is on both sides actually. Well, you probably can't see it, but on this side of the cruciform, it goes through here. There's actually a narrow spot here, and then it opens up to where it can drop down there. Not really able to see that here in the video, but it's there. So it kind of opens up in the back there, and it's narrower up front there. But then when you pull the trigger, right now it's just resting on the trigger. All right, there you go. And you can kind of see it drops down. Now it's dropped off of that little block down into this area for it. So it's kind of neat. And the reason it doesn't feel like a double action when you're pulling it is because of the trigger spring. And the reason the trigger stays back is there's no, on most guns like the M&P or the XDM, there's a trigger that wraps around the, or there's a separate trigger for the trigger itself to pull the trigger forward again. This one doesn't have that. This actually has a separate trigger that pulls the trigger back. So you see that trigger spring right in there. That's actually pulling the trigger back. So what that does is it helps cancel out the weight of the firing pin spring, and by doing that, it makes the trigger pull feel lighter because it's canceling out the weight. That's why when you buy a heavier trigger spring, it gives you a lighter trigger pull because it's canceling out the weight of the firing pin. So this is another safety in the gun that is an awesome safety. One thing to note is that all the other guns, the firing pin is completely charged and ready to hit the primer. On this gun, the firing pin is not completely charged. The firing pin is actually only slightly charged, and then you charge it the rest of the way when you pull the trigger. So a couple things going on here that kind of point out that makes the gun safe. The actual block that keeps the firing pin from going because you cannot drop the seer, and then the fact that the firing pin is not even fully charged when the gun is sitting at rest with the trigger forward. So that's another safety in the safe action system, and one of the reasons why the Glock is safer than most other polymer pistols out there.